Welcome, everyone, to another edition of The Travel Show with your host, Ted Blank. Can you believe that another week has passed? And we are going to talk about something very exciting. It's great to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah, we're going to go someplace really exotic.
I love
today.
it. Well, before we talk about that a little bit more, you were telling me that you were just out and about minding your own business, and you stumbled across something very interesting in Red Wing.
I did, yes. I was on my way down to Lake City. I'm involved in Rotary, and I'm the assistant governor for this area. So I was going down to Lake City
fancy.
to meet the folks at the club there. And I came across the bridge from Wisconsin, and moored right underneath the bridge were actually two Mississippi River boats. So the American Queen and the American Duchess were both there, and what an impressive sight that was. And what a beautiful time of the year if you wanted to cruise on the upper Mississippi River. What a perfect time. I mean, the weather is just gorgeous.
Yes.
And the leaves, I don't know. I've seen them start to turn, so I think that's coming. The apples are out. Yeah, I was ready to hop on and skip the meeting and go down to New Orleans.
So do you think that that's unusual that they were both in town at the same time?
It is. I think they normally try to schedule it so that they're not in town for that. But this time of the year, fall, September, October, is the most popular time on the upper Mississippi River, so it's not a surprise that would happen.
So that's pretty awesome. So they were there for the day, I would assume, and then
Yep, they were there for the day, and folks could get on and get off and go do the excursions that they both include. So they have a really cool system. They have a hop-on, hop-off bus, and so it takes you to different places in Red Wing that you can get off, see the museum, go shopping, get back on the bus, and go to the next spot.
I
Very
love
cool.
it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that was kind of fun. So we're going to actually talk about cruising, but not on the Mississippi River or even in the United States. You know, you and I have talked about river cruises in Europe and different areas like that, but I have not even thought about cruising it where we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we're going to take another river that actually starts with the letter M, but I think that's about all that it really has in common. We're going to talk about the Mekong River. And for folks who don't know, the Mekong River is a river that starts in Cambodia in Southeast Asia, and it actually reaches the Pacific Ocean in Vietnam. So it is one of the rivers that one can cruise on if one is interested. We're going to talk about that today.
Well, tell us a bit about this river. How big is it? Is it kind of similar to the size of the Mississippi?
It's very different because this is a place where the climate, it's right on the equator. So this is a very, very hot, very tropical climate. And so in the fall, September through sort of April, the river is kind of a normal river that's navigable. It doesn't have locks and dams. It's nowhere near as sort of developed of a waterway system as the Mississippi or any of the rivers in Europe. But then at the end of April through kind of the early part of October, it's the rainy season. And they have a lot of rain. They have those monsoons that we hear about. And the river is like rivers used to be before locks and dams were invented, and the whole thing floods. And so it is actually not navigable for any type of ship or boat during the rainy season. So it's a very, very seasonal river. In the winter, when it's open for navigation, it's kind of a small, muddy river, probably like the Mississippi looked like, before the locks and dams were put into place. But in the summer, it's a raging torrent of water coming out of these hot tropical jungles that are just inundated with rain over the whole day.
So is this something that you would recommend off the bat for a first-time cruiser, or what do you think?
Well, it's interesting because, there are a lot of folks who are, kind of reaching retirement age now who maybe served during the Vietnam War or had friends or family who served in the Vietnam War. So a lot of folks who maybe aren't necessarily considering a river cruise kind of have a call to go back to this
kind
area.
Kind of a healing almost
A healing
something.
almost, yeah. So folks who serve there, I think, want to go back and see how it's changed. And folks who maybe didn't serve there still want to experience that because so many of their contemporaries did. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a typical first river cruise for folks, but for people who are, captivated by that area, it's really the best way to see the country.
So when you are thinking about a cruise like this, is it probably you'd have to add like a little bit more time just to get there would be, isn't it
so
a couple?
it's a long flight. It's a long flight to
Okay.
get there, and you cross the international date line. So on the way there and on the way back, you're going to lose, and you're going to gain a day. And it's far enough that most people who go there will go for 2 weeks. And the thing that I think is really, really neat is that the river cruise companies have put together a great itinerary where they kind of bookend the 7-day river cruise. So we'll kind of maybe walk through that a little bit and
I
kind of
would love to
explain
learn.
sort of how it goes. If you want to, you can actually fly to Bangkok in Thailand beforehand and spend a couple days there. Fascinating, beautiful city. It's crisscrossed with canals. And I don't know, I always think of that James Bond episode where he was chasing people through the canals of Bangkok.
Yes.
So a really neat city with some really incredible heritage. But with the Vietnam cruises, normally you'll actually start in the north. So you'll start in Hanoi, the capital of old North Vietnam. So you'll fly into Hanoi. And Hanoi is actually a relatively small city compared to Saigon, which we know it as, or Ho Chi Minh City, as it's known as today. So you'll spend a night or two in Hanoi, have a chance to see some of the French colonial relics that are still there, and also view some Vietnam War history.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So let's say you're leaving from the Twin Cities area. Do you fly to the West Coast first and then go? Or
You might fly to the West Coast. You might fly to one of the big Asian hubs like Tokyo or
you can
Seoul.
fly straight from
You fly from Minneapolis to Tokyo,
Okay.
and I believe this fall the flight to Seoul is starting back up. So
Okay.
you fly there, and just like flying to Europe, you make a connection and hop on a flight, and you arrive in either Bangkok or Hanoi, depending on where you're going to start.
But that is quite a...
Yeah, the flight across the Pacific is more like 13, 14 hours, whereas the flight to Europe is more like 6 to 8 hours.
So what would you recommend? That we leave Minneapolis and then wherever we land in Asia, we should stay overnight and then take another flight, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think really works well with these river cruises is they sort of plan that first night you arrive in the destination for you just to kind of relax. So if you wanted to, you could, stop over in Seoul or stop over in Tokyo on your way. If you've never been there, that'd be a neat thing to do. But if you kind of have 2 weeks, you just fly straight through, kind of power through the day and then get to your hotel and relax and have an evening to kind of catch up on your sleep.
So typically this starts in Hanoi.
In Hanoi. It actually can go in either direction, but we'll start in Hanoi.
And is that the top of the Mekong River?
It's actually nowhere near the Mekong River.
Oh.
So it's in Vietnam. It's in North Vietnam.
Okay.
And you're actually going to go on kind of about a 5 to 6 day trip before you even get to the Mekong River.
What?
Yep. So you'll start out in Hanoi.
Okay.
And then they do something that I think is super, super cool. They take you to a place called Ha Long Bay. And Ha Long Bay is a beautiful bay, and you'll actually take an overnight cruise on the bay. So you get on this modern version of a historic Vietnamese sailing boat, and you sail around this incredibly scenic bay, spend the night in a nice cabin on board this luxury ship, and the next day you'll get off, and then you'll fly south to Ho Chi Minh City.
Oh,
to
my
Saigon.
goodness.
Yep.
And this is all part of the cruise?
This is all part of the cruise. This is kind of a cruise and a tour put together all into one. And the nice thing is it's very seamless. It's really very professionally done. And this is a place where it would be very difficult for you to travel independently.
Oh,
so
I can't
they take
imagine.
care of all those little logistical things that can be a challenge.
And you take care of getting us to this wonderful destination to take care of all those additional
So
details.
it's a place where I'm going to want to have a long conversation with folks about a lot of different things because it's very hot.
And there are moving parts to
lot
this
of
that
moving
a lot
parts,
of
moving parts,
other...
and surprisingly a lot of different options that are available
Oh, it
as
sure
well.
sounds like it.
So kind of pick the right one out of the menu for each person.
So then once we fly then to Ho Chi Minh City.
Ho Chi Minh City. Yeah, so that's the place that I think most Americans would recognize if they saw pictures from the Vietnam War. That's where the presidential palace was, which is now a museum. And there are museums there dedicated to the Vietnam War that you can look at. It's also a city that has a very rich French heritage to it. So a lot of the architecture is French colonial. There's an incredible cathedral there, Notre Dame Cathedral.
Surprising,
Yeah,
right?
surprising. The post office is just this gorgeous Art Deco building from the 1930s. So a lot of neat things that aren't even related to the Vietnam War that you can go see. And certainly if you want to experience that Vietnam War piece of it in a little more depth, there are tours and excursions that include that as well. So after 2 nights in Ho Chi Minh City, then you'll take the bus. It's about an hour and a half ride to the Mekong River, and that's where you'll board your river cruise ship.
And that's typically, that looks more like what we consider to be a river cruise ship.
Yeah, but they're probably about half the size of the ones in Europe. They
Oh,
carry
okay.
40 to 60 passengers,
That's
and the ones
it.
in Europe, the ones in Europe carry 150 to 200 passengers. So most of them are quite spacious. They're all suite vessels. They kind of pay tribute to that sort of Asian colonial architecture that you see on land. So they have mahogany floors and beautiful Asian-inspired decor inside. And this is going to be your home for 7 days as you head up the river into Cambodia.
So how many different cruise lines are on the Mekong River?
There are about 5 that
Okay.
operate there. And then there are some
the
of the
majority of them out of Europe?
They're either European or American.
Okay.
Oh, and some are Australian, actually, because you're relatively close to Australia. And then some of the tour companies, the land tour companies, will also work with the cruise lines where they'll charter the ship and they'll do a land program before or after. That'll be similar to what I'm talking about or maybe a little bit different.
And so this cruise is is it a week or can you?
It's 7 days.
Okay.
Yep, it's a week-long cruise. And it's just like the other river cruises, the meals, the excursions are going to be included. Some of the ships will offer a nice choice of excursions. Some will only have one included. They all have a pool because if I haven't said it before, it gets really, really hot there, even in the winter. So
Okay.
hopping in your pool is a nice thing. But most of the ships have balconies, and of course they have air conditioning. And they're Western standard ships. They're fully 5-star operation.
What are some of the things that people have said about these cruises to you?
They kind of come in 2 forms. So the folks who have that connection to the Vietnam War era, for them it is, as you said, it's very much a healing experience. And they'll often say, I never really appreciated what a beautiful and interesting place this was.
I'm sure not.
Because that wasn't at the top of your priority list when you were there. Folks who don't have that connection to the war, they're really struck by the culture and the people and the beauty of like the temples and rice paddies where they still raise rice kind of by hand with hand tools. And in many ways it's a trip back in time.
Okay.
Things have changed in the big cities like Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. They're modern cities. They're crowded with people. They have skyscrapers. In the rural areas, they're still doing things by hand. Some of the villages you go to, they don't have roads. The only way to get there is on a little boat that picks you up at your cruise ship and takes you in there. Folks have a chance to go visit a school and actually see what education is like in this, very underdeveloped part of the world. A lot of Buddhist temples in the area, so you can see and learn more about that very fascinating religion. One of the places you'll stop is you'll actually spend the night in Phnom Penh. And Phnom Penh is the capital of Cambodia. Again, another beautiful city with some fascinating history, but it's also the place where the killing fields were. And so folks can learn about that. One of the options is an excursion to a museum that, I think does a very sensitive job of interpreting a really horrible chapter in human history. And so there's such a contrast, I think, between some of the horrible things that happened here in the past and what a beautiful and peaceful place it is now. So for people, it's a trip that happens on, I think, many levels. Kind of the intellectual and the emotional kind of come together, the historical, but it's beautiful. And there's great food and friendly people, and just the scenery alone would be worth it if nothing historical had happened there. So it's really got everything. And I really recommend that people think about putting this on their list, even if they don't have that connection to the Vietnam era there, because it is such an interesting and emotional place. It's kind of like going to Normandy and visiting the beaches of D-Day, or even going to Gettysburg and seeing the Civil War battlefields. So after Phnom Penh, the ship kind of keeps going north, and eventually you'll get off the ship and you'll go to one of the most incredible ruins in the world.
Oh.
And that's a place called Angkor Wat. And Angkor Wat is a temple, and it is huge. It's like the size of the Mall of America and the Minneapolis Airport all put together, and it was lost in the jungle for hundreds and hundreds of years. And finally, at some point during the French occupation of Cambodia, a French archaeologist rediscovered it. And so they've slowly been kind of going in and hacking the jungle away and excavating it.
How
and
fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Very, very well preserved. I mean, Google it. It's ANGKORWAT. Just breathtaking, incredible, and actually still mostly not restored or excavated yet. So there's a lot of history to be found there. And these are very ancient civilizations. These were built at a time when, the pyramids were being built in Egypt. So these are very, very ancient civilizations. And the city you stay at there is a little city called Siem Reap. And so it sprung up because of these historic ruins there. But there are some really nice resorts there. They all have really nice pools because, if I haven't mentioned it, it's really, really hot.
We stay there. Do we actually get off the ship?
So you get off the ship and you'll spend your
okay.
last 2 or 3 nights in Siem Reap in a hotel. The excursions there always take place first thing in the morning. So you can get back to the hotel and be at the hotel and relax by the pool during the hottest part of the day. My youngest brother, who is a runner, and he enjoys running. He's actually climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. He was defeated by the heat at Angkor Wat. So it gets really, really hot. You'll go in the morning, have the afternoon to kind of relax by the pool, and then in the evening you'll have another activity. So it's about a 2-week cycle, and you make sort of a big U starting in Hanoi, making your way down, coming up the river for 7 days, and then ending in Siem Reap. So a really neat experience that is one of those real once-in-a-lifetime opportunities.
Sure sounds like it.
It really is, yeah.
And then where do you fly out of?
So there's an airport in Siem Reap.
Okay.
It's actually a major tourist destination because of these ruins. And so from there you can fly back to Bangkok or Singapore or Tokyo or Seoul or one of the major international airports and fly back home from there.
Singapore?
Yep. Yeah, you just fly a little ways south, get on a plane in Singapore and fly to Los Angeles. Or I think they fly to Chicago from Singapore too. So
wow.
Yeah. So it's actually, relatively easy to get to. You might have 2 connections to get to Vietnam. You can actually fly nonstop to Vietnam from Los Angeles. So a lot of ways to get there via air. And once you're there, it is just an incredible, different world. And even for folks who were there during the war, I think they realize what an incredible different world it is today. And so that's probably a positive way to think about it with all that suffering that went on, is that, things have gotten better there now and peace has returned. And that is a neat thing to see, whether you served there or didn't.
Well, I really had not ever heard of this, the Mekong River, or even these cruises on it. What a great opportunity for people, like you said, to kind of heal and see a new part of the world in such a beautiful way. And I like how it's a long trip.
Yeah.
So you're not exhausted and just sleeping all day on the boat.
No, it's a very, very nice pace. And one of the things that makes this attractive for people is that river cruises in Asia cost about half as much as they cost in Europe.
Oh.
So you could do this for quite a bit less than you would do a river cruise on the Danube or the Rhine. So if you're up for a little adventure, something to consider.
I love it. Ted, how could people get a hold of you, please?
Yeah, the best way to get a hold of me is to give me a call at 651-964-8245. You can visit my website at www.tedblanktravel.com, or you can like me on Facebook at facebook.com/tedblanktravel.
I love it. Ted Blank, he is the host of The Travel Show on AM 1460 and FM 97.7 KDWA in Hastings. This travel show has been brought to you by Ted Blank, Luxury Travel and Adventures.